Dave Brown sat in his formal lounge room, in his recliner. Facing his chair was an empty couch. Between his chair and the couch was a coffee table with 3 champagne flutes on it, 1 full, 2 empty. Next to the table was a bottle of the stuff in an ice bucket. Anyone observing him as he relaxed at 7:02 p.m. that night may have been slightly worried when he spoke clearly. "Right, I hear her car in the driveway." But there were no observers. Dave was alone in the room. He continued to sit there looking relaxed as the front door opened. It wasn't within sight of where he sat, but he immediately heard his wife's voice. "Where are you, Dave?" "In the formal lounge, Deb," Dave replied. Dave stood abruptly as his wife entered through the archway. She was gripping the hand of a man perhaps 5 years younger than her 49 years. He was slim, of about average height, and wearing a business suit. In her other hand, she held an A4 orange envelope. Dave, this is Michael. Michael, this is my husband, Dave." Noting her averted eyes and generally nervous demeanor, Dave took 3 steps and shook the intruder's hand warmly. "I'm very pleased to meet you, Michael. Do you mind if I call you Mike?" "Not at all, sir," he replied. "Oh, please, Dave will be fine. Can I offer you a glass of champagne? Please, won't you both take a seat?" Dave watched as 2 very confused people sat on the couch and took the offered glasses after he filled them. "Cheers. Now, do you mind telling this simple soul what's going on?" Deborah and Mike looked at each other. Mike gave an almost imperceptible nod and squeezed her hand. Dave, there's no nice way of saying this, so I'll just come straight out with it. Michael and I have fallen in love. I would like a divorce so we can get married." She stopped, waiting to feel her husband's wrath, raising her gaze from the floor so she could see the expression on Dave's face. This was going to be ugly. She just knew it. It can't have sunk in yet. His face remained neutral. Unconsciously, she moved slightly closer to Mike. "Okay, Deb, are those the divorce papers?" Dave asked. Deb looked up again, stunned. She'd rehearsed this scene many times in her head, but never in her wildest dreams did it ever go like this. She looked at Mike and tried to convey with her eyes, "I don't know what to say." Michael stepped up to the plate. He took the envelope from Deb and placed it on the table. "Yes, Dave, they are. I think you will find them very reasonable. Deb is asking for nothing from you but her car. In the packet is her quit claim on this house, your car, all your joint assets, and your retirement fund. Everything is signed and notarized from our side. I should warn you that I am a lawyer, so everything is watertight, but feel free to engage your own representative to reassure yourself." "Well, I must say, you have both been very generous," Dave replied calmly. Deb was still looking very nervous, like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. "That was Mike's idea, Dave. In fact, he insisted. He said it was bad enough that he was stealing your wife without taking your hard-earned assets as well. It was in no way my motivation, but Mike is quite wealthy. Even without your money, we will have more than you and I would ever have owned, Dave." Deb spoke nervously. Maybe that might have been different if you'd got a job after the kids were old enough and helped out with the finances, Deb." Deb just dropped her eyes again. "So, Mike, is your wife going to get a similar speech to this one, or has she already received it?" Dave asked. "No. My wife died 8 years ago. I'm a widower," Mike replied. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mike, really." "Thank you, Dave. It hurt like hell for a year or so, but time heals all wounds, as they say. Look, I'm really sorry about this, but I met Deb and she was like the missing half of my soul. I didn't think I would ever be complete again. I wanted to tell you that I loved your wife months ago, but she talked me out of it." "That's fine, Mike. I've never been one to harbor grudges. Please marry her with my blessing," Dave replied calmly. Mike and Deb exchanged bemused looks. Deb because it was so different from what she'd expected. Then, she felt a huge sense of relief. Months ago, she'd led Michael to believe that her marriage to Dave was on the rocks. that they were trying to save it, but hopes weren't high. She knew that the weak point in her plan was Dave's reaction, making Mike see that wasn't exactly true. That's why she'd begged Mike to do all this without a face-to-face confrontation. Mike insisted that true men sorted out problems face-to-face. He refused to be swayed. Mike was bemused because, even with Deb telling him that her marriage was on its last legs, he'd expected an angrier reaction to the announcement that it wasn't going to be saved. He'd developed a mental picture of Dave from Deb's descriptions. From what she said, he was a big, uneducated man, used to sorting out problems with his fists. Mike had tarried with the idea of bringing a bodyguard along tonight, but finally dismissed that thought. In the back of his mind was that if the aggrieved husband roughed him up a bit, it may ease his own conscience slightly. His own feelings of decency were giving him a very hard time with all this. "So, Deb, I presume you met Mike at one of your girls' nights out?" Dave asked. Deb nodded at the coffee table. "One of the girls' nights out that you assured me were totally harmless and no threat to our marriage when I raised concerns." Deb nodded at the floor this time. "I think there's a lesson for you there, Mikey boy." Mike glanced at Deb. Deb's eyes moved to a section of the floor a little further away from Mike. "So, what happens now, people? Come on, you must have a plan. You're giving me the house, so I presume you were going to pack your things, Deb, and move to his house. Please, don't let me stop you." "I was going to do that tomorrow while you were at work," Deb replied. "By tomorrow, the locks will be changed. I'm sure your lawyer friend will agree that's a wise thing for me to do. Simpler if you do it now, don't you think?" Deb and Mike rose to go upstairs to get started. "How about you stay and we can talk, Mike? Deb can make a start on the packing. Come on, Mike, let's chat. I think you owe me that at least." Deb was torn between her desire to escape this really uncomfortable situation and the need to witness anything said. In the end, her decision was made for her by Mike sitting back down. "Off you go, Deb. I promise not to hurt him. I just want to chat. Until we are divorced, I will feel responsible for your safety still. I just want to assure myself that he has your best interests at heart. Besides, you've made your decision to leave me. I really don't see the point of trying to talk you out of it. Our marriage is dead, obviously." Both men watched her mount the stairs and disappear. "I must say, you're being very reasonable about this, Dave," Mike spoke. "That's fine, Mike. Between you and me, there hasn't been much love coming my way from Deb for about a year now. I presume that's when you met. It'll be a relief, really. I have no desire to consign either of us to a loveless marriage." "It's still very decent of you, Dave," Mike replied. "You're welcome, Mike. Now, as a lawyer, you will know that whenever you sell a car or a house, you are legally bound to point out any known faults to the new owners." Mike laughed. "Well, slavery is dead, and I don't think Deb would appreciate being thought of as property that needs a transfer of ownership, but I know what you mean, Dave." Dave smiled as well. He'd guessed right that Mike was an intelligent and decent man. "Okay. Now please believe that what I'm about to tell you is not motivated by malice. I simply want to point out some flaws in Deb that may not be apparent after only knowing her for a year. Also, believe it or not, her future happiness is important to me. I've loved her for 27 years after all. I'd also just like to share with you all the things I've tried to make her happy, but obviously failed. That way you'll know not to waste your time doing the same." Mike nodded. He knew what was to come probably wasn't going to be all altruistically intended, but he did feel he owed it to this innocent man to listen. "Right. I assume Deb has gone back on the pill?" Dave asked. Mike nodded again, slightly uncomfortable. It was tantamount to admitting that he'd slept with the guy's wife. "She's on the pill, yes. I had no idea she'd ever been off it. Apart from when you had your children, of course," Mike replied. "She was on the pill when we met, but about 6 to 12 months after we got married, she begged off them. She said they depressed her sexual appetite and made her not want intimacy. From then, till I presume she went back on them for you, It has been protection for me. Can't stand the bloody things. They take all the spontaneity out of it, and I don't know about you, but I struggle to get off in them." "Yes, I know exactly what you mean, Dave," Mike replied. Then, after we decided to stop at 2 children, she started using the protection as an excuse not to make love as often. She pointed out their known failure rate. I begged her to go back on the pill, but she refused, saying she didn't want to have to swallow artificial chemicals every day. Since then, our lovemaking has dropped from several times a week to several times a month, to nothing. About a year ago. Mike didn't say anything. He knew Deb was very careful about what food she ate and, wherever possible, chose chemical-free options. Intimacy with her was still exciting and happened at least 3 times a week, even with the restrictions on their meetings. "I know this is a very ungentlemanly question, Mike, but does she swallow, you know?" Mike found this a very uncomfortable question. People in his class didn't talk about such things. He couldn't help his eyes averting. "I see. Yes, I remember what she was like when Deb and I were dating. Now, please remember, I don't say any of this from malice. If I sold you a car that I knew was going to throw a wheel 6 months after I got rid of it, I would warn you about that as well. Deb hasn't done that for me since shortly after the wedding. In fact, I don't think I've had a blowjob since about 18 months after we married, and doggy style dropped out shortly after that. I didn't realize that we'd stopped having intimacy totally until quite recently. I just got sick of getting knockbacks and gave up asking. Maybe you might like to write in your diary to watch for any sudden drop-offs every month or so." Dave paused to allow Mike to add anything, but he didn't take the opportunity. Now, another thing I didn't notice until a couple of years after we were married. I looked around one day and suddenly realized that just about everything I'd owned pre-Deb was gone. Bed, clothes, couch, and photos of old girlfriends. Although, to be fair, I did find those in the attic. I don't know if all women do that, or it's just Deb, but it's like she wanted to clear the nest of previous female influence. Again, Dave paused, and again, Mike didn't comment. He was thinking of his brand new bed and sheet sets. Then, he thought of his conversation with Deb a week ago, about the portrait of his first wife. A woman he'd loved dearly until she'd been forcibly removed from his life. "I hope you're better at picking up her lies than me, Mike. Only 3 weeks ago, I asked if she still loved me, and if we were still good. She looked me right in the eyes and said, yes. She even did the same thing she always did, looked into each of my eyes in turn until I was the one to break eye contact. I can't believe it took just 3 weeks to fall out of love so thoroughly." Mike was reeling a little from the unexpectedness of this conversation, and from all the information Dave was trying to get him to absorb. Something about those last couple of sentences was setting off alarm bells, but he had no time to pinpoint the source, so he focused on the one aspect he could absorb. "No worries there, Dave. I'm a lawyer. I've spent 20 years learning how to spot liars. They always give themselves away," Mike finally answered. "Good. Again, just some advice you can take or leave. Watch out for her removing her rings when she goes to visit her sister. You might want to check her underwear drawer. That's where she's been putting them here for the last few weeks that I know of. You might also want to follow her on any girls' nights out. I suggest you don't blindly trust her like I did. I thought she was totally incapable of being deceptive, but I'm obviously a schmuck. Now what else can I tell you? Oh yeah, if she's true to form, she'll probably stop going to the gym in about 6 to 12 months and stack on a bit of weight." At this point, Dave stood and retrieved a photo album from a shelf and leafed through the pages. "Here's a couple of photos from 2 years ago, when she started going for her girls' nights. As you can see, her face and back get a little chubby. She never could lose the little pot, but after 2 kids, who would be surprised at that?" Mike flipped a few pages and saw a chubbier version of his fiancée with far less makeup on than he'd ever seen. He was slightly stunned at the difference a little makeup made. He continued flipping back through the pages. "Is this Deb's mother? I can see the strong resemblance," Mike asked. "Yes, it is. Hang on a minute. Dave stood again and retrieved a few more albums and flipped through them. As you can see, she was a fine-looking woman. This is her when she was about 50. She was a very striking woman still. Dave picked up another album and opened it to a page. He waited for Mike to state the obvious. "God, how old is she in this one?" Mike asked. "About 55. She was one of those women that as soon as she hit menopause, around 52 or 53, rapidly lost her looks. She took it very gracefully, though, just said that she thanked God for the outward beauty she'd been blessed with for so long." Dave watched as Mike alternated staring at the two photographs. He remembered 2 months ago when he'd celebrated Deb's 49th birthday early because she wanted to spend her actual birthday weekend with her sister. He did notice that Mike seemed to have lost his easy smile and pushed home his advantage. "Now, I promised to tell you all the mistakes I made that failed to get her to stay in love with me. I suggest you try a different approach. Mine was obviously flawed." Dave paused to pour them fresh glasses of champagne. "Now, if it's anything like 25 years ago, she'll want a flash wedding like ours. I tried to object, saying we'd be better putting the cash into a house, but she guilted me into it. She said that if I had faith that we were going to be together forever, then I wouldn't resent splurging out on a big day for her. I'll hunt you up a copy of our wedding vows if you like. From memory, we stuck to the traditional love, honor, obey, and forsaking all others. If you try something different, you may do better than me. Not really relevant for you, but don't bother working your fingers to the bone and do crap loads of overtime so she can get the flash house she always wanted. That obviously didn't keep her legs together. While I'm at it, don't bother nursing her for 2 months if she gets glandular fever again. It didn't do me any good. Nor did going into debt so she could have the breast implants and tummy tucks she wanted 2 years ago. Actually, thinking about it, we're probably right here because I refused to pay for the facelift she wanted, preferring to put the money into our retirements. She can be quite persistent when she has her heart set on something. You've probably noticed." Mike nodded while wondering if that characteristic of Deb's was really the admirable quality he'd hit her to think. "Now, I thought I was being smart by taking her on a date night every month and making a point of inviting her to discuss anything about me or our relationship that was starting to niggle. You know, causing the slightest resentment type of thing. Our last date was less than a month ago and she didn't say anything. A man of your caliber will be able to think of a better way, I'm sure." At that point, Mike noticed the twinkle in Dave's eyes and suddenly realized what he was up to. Nevertheless, he'd made some good points. The point of Deb being completely free from guile resonated strongly with some thoughts of his own in recent times. He was so put off by Dave's apparent amusement at this whole scenario that he ignored his internal alarm bells again. Dave kept talking, despite the fact they were both obviously aware that Deb had stopped descending the stairs, easily within earshot. "Keep an eye out for lists of things she intends to remove from the house when you separate. That is a good clue that she's already treating your marriage with contempt and meeting your replacement. It won't change what will happen that much, but it will allow you to mentally prepare for the endgame that she has planned and spur you to start digging elsewhere for other evidence." Mike blinked and looked around. For the first time, he saw the 3 champagne glasses and ice bucket. Clear evidence that all 3 persons present knew about today's meeting beforehand, when it should have been just 2. In the high intensity of his entrance, his normal, highly observant nature missed the clues. Dave watched Mike's eyes flicker around the scene. "Yes, I knew it was tonight. Deb rang me twice today to make sure I was going to be home by 7. Mike's eyes left Dave's and flicked towards where Deb was halfway down the stairs. Deb restarted her descent, obviously pretending that she hadn't overheard the last few minutes of conversation. "Dave, do you want to talk about which of the family photos I can take now, or do it some other day?" she asked. Dave ignored her and leaned towards the couch opposite, keeping eye contact with his rival. "The last thing I think I may have done wrong was to forgive Deb the first time I caught her cheating on our marriage." "What?" Mike asked. No, from Deborah's mouth as it retreated at speed with the rest of her into the kitchen. Yes, it was just after the birth of our second child. I forgave her because she and our counselor convinced me it was a one-off mistake brought on by postnatal depression. I've often wondered if I was too soft on her. Maybe a harder line at the time may have prevented it from happening again. I justified my actions at the time as being in the best interests of the kids. They've grown up to be fine adults, so hopefully I did the right thing by them. For her sake, I hope you're generous enough to forgive her when your time comes. I don't know what to say, Dave, Mike muttered. No need to say anything, Mike. Just answer me this. Look in your heart and ask yourself if you would have forgiven your late wife if you'd caught her with someone in your own bed. For the first time in almost an hour, Mike lost his cool. He leaned forward. Dave saw movement out of the corner of his eye and glanced to see an ashen-faced Deborah standing in the kitchen doorway. My wife would never have disrespected me like that. We loved each other too. Hang on a minute. You said, the first time Deb cheated on you? Were there other times? Mike asked. No, just the 2 times. Then and now, Dave replied. Deb launched out of the kitchen. She shouted desperately, I've finished packing Mike. If you grab my cases, we can get out of here now. Be quiet, Deborah. This last was said in a low but implacable voice. Surprisingly, the voice was Mike's. Deb stopped dead in her tracks. Mike turned back to face Dave. Deborah assured me that she wasn't cheating because you had an open marriage, Dave. Did she look you in the eye when she told you this, Mike? Dave asked. Mike looked at Dave, then at a cringing Deb, then back to Dave. Dave saw in Mike's eyes the sudden realization that he wasn't as good at spotting liars as he'd believed. What did she tell you about the state of our marriage, Mike? Dave asked. She said it had been shaky for a few years, Dave. That you'd been going to counseling for a while, but neither of you was that hopeful. Dave didn't say anything, just looked at Mike until he kept talking to fill the void. Now I think of it, that's not really consistent with what you said about still having date nights and asking if she still loved you. Dave again just kept looking into Mike's eyes. He picked the exact moment that Mike realized he'd been played for a complete sucker. A look, easily interpreted as self-loathing, washed over the smaller man's face. Mike turned to a frozen Deborah. You cheating woman! You've turned me into the type of person I despise the most. A man that meets other men's wives without their knowledge, Mike roared. With the force of this statement, Deb sank to her knees. Mike was suddenly at a loss for words and took an interest in the same patch of carpet that Deb found so fascinating before. He finally rallied and looked back at Dave. Please, Dave, you have to believe me. I'd no idea. Don't sweat it, Mike. I told you she was a good liar. Christ, I wish she'd told me we had an open marriage. That way I may have got laid in the last year. The deliberate use of humor in the very intense situation seemed to work. Mike relaxed a little but remained silent. Does this mean the engagement is off? Dave asked. Yes, definitely, Mike answered. In that case, there's a couple of people I want you to meet. John, Alice. At that moment, the door to the basement opened. At the noise, Mike turned to see a young man and woman approaching. Mike, I'd like you to meet my son John and daughter Alice. They've been listening to our conversations via a microphone. John finished law school 2 years ago, and Alice finishes a science degree this year. Both John and Alice shook a bewildered Mike's hand. John then grabbed the envelope off the table and started perusing the contents emotionlessly. Dave turned to his daughter. Do you believe me now, Alice? Dave asked. Yes, Dad. There's no doubt she is one cold, conniving schemer. All eyes turned towards the groan. Deb was still on her knees, but now her head was in her hands, resting on the floor. When she sensed the silence, she looked up into 4 accusing stares. She jumped up and ran out the front door. No one made any attempt to stop or follow her. John calmly finished flicking through the contents of the envelope. This all seems to be in order, Dad. Good, thanks. Now, who would like a beer? That fizzy is fine, but I need a beer to get the taste out of my mouth. I think I should go, Mike answered. You stay right here, Mikey boy. We still have some things to sort out. Like what? Mike asked. Well, I can forgive you for sleeping with the dopey woman, her claims of having an open marriage and all that. But I've still to decide whether to rip off your head and spit down your neck for trying to steal her away. Mike looked at the other man, noting he was a head taller and much bigger due to his manual job. Then he looked into the eyes and saw the now familiar twinkle. Mike was starting to regret not bringing some muscle with him. He could have asked them to belt their own client until the lesson that he'd been stupidly naive was firmly entrenched. He had no idea where he stood now. Dave decided to ease his confusion. John is in the same line of law as you are, Mike. By this time, Mike was not at all surprised that Dave knew so much about him. Then the penny dropped. How's your current job, John? Mike asked. The hours are crap and the salary sucks, John replied. Would you like to come and work with me? Mike asked. Hell yeah, John replied. Dave smiled. Then there's the matter of my ex-wife's upkeep until she can find a job. Thanks to your excellent work, she no longer has a house or any money. With a growing feeling of relief, Mike entered into the new spirit. I'm sorry, Dave. As soon as she lied to me, she breached the implied contract we had. In cases of breach of contract, ownership reverts to the previous title holder. Yes, but morally? Dave asked. Don't talk to me about morals, I'm a lawyer. John, do you have a dictionary? Look up the word morals, will you? I'm a bit hazy on what it actually means. Everyone laughed. No, seriously, Mike. I think you owe it to me to look after her till she's back on her feet. If you play your cards right, you can pretend to be considering keeping her and get the thing spoiled out of you in bed for a while. Ugh, no, I couldn't go there. I will see if she's right, though. Not for her, but for you. I admire skill wherever I see it, and I've been totally outclassed tonight, haven't I? Have you ever considered a career in law, Dave? The way you kept me off balance by posing negatives as positives and never giving me time to think was worthy of the best prosecutor I've ever seen. Dave smiled modestly, but didn't answer. He loved his job and the people who surrounded him at work. Right. That's 4 beers then, is it? For the first time, Dave looked away from everyone. Until he was sure the tears forming in the corners of his eyes were gone, there would be no more eye contact. By this time, Deborah Brown was 700 meters away, on foot, and still accelerating away from the burning bridges. And so, we've reached the end of today's story. Was it what you expected, or did it take a twist you didn't see coming? I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's get a conversation going. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new here or just haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time to join our community. I bring you fresh, captivating stories every day, so click that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.